let's dive into it. So, Avery, thanks so much for being on this interview, podcast, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, very.
Podcast. You have a podcast. Welcome to your podcast.
What was it that drove you to like build a business and get into the online business specifically?
Okay. So, um, I finished college.
Mhm.
I was dating a girl, and then I spent a year after college traveling. So me and one of my best friends just traveled really the world. We went to about 20 countries,
Oh, wow.
for a year, and it was really fun. It was really fun. And so when I got done with that, I moved to Annapolis, where I now live, because the girl I was dating at the time lived here, and she was finishing up nursing school. And so I knew I wanted to marry her to an extent. I was like, this is pretty serious. We started dating 3 months before I traveled. So
Oh,
the majority of our relationship was like uber long distance. Like the way you relate to Americans was the way I related to my girlfriend. It was like, I'm in
awesome.
Australia. We have 3 hours to talk.
Yeah.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning, 1 p.m. your time. Like this is I don't know. That was a poor example, but it was 16 hours, 15 to 16 hours ahead. Um, and so I moved back here, and there was a older friend of mine who I thought I wanted to become a financial advisor,
Mhm.
because a lot of the folks that I knew who were successful were financial advisors. And but then I realized that financial advising wasn't actually helping people with their money, and I was 23 and grew up poor, so like I don't know what to do with money anyway. But I found out it was really just sales, and my older friend said, you should really go check out this guy named Adam Rundle. He is a friend of ours who's starting an accounting firm out of his basement. And I know he knew I had some startup background because in college I worked in startups. And he was like, I think you should do sales for him. And I was like, okay, whatever. But I met with Adam and really fell in love with the vision of what he had created. And it was also like pretty like, it was pretty easy to sell me. Like I was pretty impressionable at the time.
Okay.
Um, and so I was like, okay, who are we? It could have been selling accounting services to account. It could have been. It wasn't purposeful that I got into the online space. It was happenstance. Um, and so that's the genesis.
Oh, and then how did that take you from there to following like building out agency, helping agency
Yep.
owners kind of thing?
So it started in selling agency owners financial services, mainly accounting and taxes. And what that enabled me to do, we didn't want to start with selling compliance, meaning like we didn't want to just sell bookkeeping and taxes, which was dumb. Like looking back now, what was the catalyst for a lot of Clever's growth was learning, hey, if you just do their books and take care of the taxes, that segues quite nicely into having a conversation about helping them manage their money as business owners.
Hmm.
But we were really pigeonholing ourselves at the beginning of going, we only wanted to work with large businesses. We only wanted to help them in a financial consulting aspect. And um, it was purely it was online businesses that included marketing agencies and included coaching programs. At the time, one of our first clients was traffic and funnels, and that was really in their. You've been in the online space for a while, so you know they're no longer around, but they were really the genesis for a lot of at least a big section of the internet market. And we were definitely deep into it.
Hmm.
The only reason I was hired is because Adam gave one talk at TNF event. Yeah, so it was 5 sales calls that got booked. So like 5 people came up to the event and were like, "We want to hire you," right? And as any entrepreneur, they're like, "What am I going to do with all these sales calls?" Their first time really getting some sense of like, kind of like right when someone turns the ads on for the first time. And you probably experienced this too, although there was a wall between you and the customer being white label, but now as you're growing your direct agency of like when something works really well that hasn't worked before to bring in customers, that beginning hit is like a drug. You're like, my it's like the entire world opens up around you. You can just see everything clearly now.
Yeah.
None of it's going to happen, but it's like, I'm gonna be freaking rich. And
Yeah.
that's what it was for Adam, to where you're like, you guys aren't, there's two of you in a basement, you know, you have 10 clients. Like you don't need a
Yeah.
salesperson right now. So for 6 months I literally didn't do any sales. I just was there because we had 5 sales calls and that
Yeah.
was that for like 6 months. And that was honestly a pretty hard ego thing for me because um when the guy I spent the year traveling with, he left the year and immediately got a job at a big four consulting firm, which you would know, Accenture. I imagine you would
Oh,
know.
yes.
I mean,
Yes.
presence in, yeah, they have a presence in India. Um, so he got a job for 120K starting, and I was like for me, I was like $100,000. Like that is a that's you're rich, and he started out there. So I was working with Adam part time and waiting tables at the same time, trying to save up enough money to buy an engagement ring. Like I didn't know what I was doing. And then they brought me on some reason full time in January of 2019. I essentially in June of that year was going to quit. Gave it 3 months, and I would just sit in Adam's basement watching traffic and funnels course videos, trying to figure out how to do organic.
Hmm.
And something clicked, and it started. I was there doing like random keeping and random shit, and just started pretending really to be Adam Rundle on his Facebook, and started booking lots of sales calls. And then I wasn't taking the sales calls at
Okay.
first, which was fine. I was booking them for Adam,
It just
and I
defeats
and
the
then
purpose of you being a salesperson there.
couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Got the softest intro into sales. Um, there was probably that was June, July, August started really working, and then in like maybe it was like late August, September, I started booking so many calls. I just listened to Adam do the call so many times where I was like, I went, and it was just three of us, right? Like we were Adam, and also Adam's very unprofessional for those who know him. I went up to him and I was like, I think you're doing this wrong. Like, I'm not the one taking the sales calls, but I think you're doing it wrong. Like, I think you should ask for the card on the call. And he's like, you know what? He got mad. He was like, you know what? You take the next call. And Rob Bailey, who you may know, Rob
Yeah.
Bailey's another fun guy
Yeah.
in the space. Great guy. Rob Bailey sent us a referral of these two these two kids in college in Alabama who had they were making like $30,000 a month, and they're still in college. So they're like, whoa. And they were like, we got to get ahead of our taxes because I don't know, they're just scared about something. And we get on a call and I freeze. The first like I go, hey guys, what's going on? And then they're like, all right. And I was like, what? I I just didn't know what to do. So I just started rambling. And then I got to the end of my pitch and I was like, so what's your card number? And
Did-
Adam was sitting in the other room and they gave me their card info and I put it into Stripe and charged the card and I walked over to Adam and I was like I told you it was that easy. And we would go so long not getting paid for like we sent so many invoices not ever
Yeah.
asking just for the card. And it was at that moment Adam was like, I'm never getting on another sales call. Similar
It
to
was
what I
for
was
that
talking
moment
about.
that you were hired to be a salesperson.
Yeah, that was the real moment things started. Um, and I just remember that it's similar to the like, oh, the ads are finally like for the first time they're working and leads are coming in. Similar to that, I was like, I'm gonna close. Like I totally know what I'm doing, but it's totally, for your beginning sales, it's a lot of just beginner's luck,
Yeah.
just decent people skills. But we're really deep here. I don't know if you wanted all this.
Uh,
But that transformed into we built that from three of us in a basement to 25 of us. I left there in 2020, was doing my own thing consulting, trying to recreate the success we had there, which was very product centric growth.
mhm.
Thinking I've seen all these kids and all their money that they're making and all these courses, random shit that they're selling. I can bring something to the market. One of my clients was an agency. I we figured out we worked out a partnership, and so I came on there at the beginning of 2020 or end of 2020 or 2021, I can't remember.
Hmm.
And then I stepped in as COO, and we co-ran a marketing agency together for about two and some change years. And so that's really where I had marketing experience and did marketing and learned. I was the only sales guy and running all the marketing and starting to run ads. And
Yeah.
I got some media buying and all that kind of experience there. But having to run and build a marketing agency to which we really, I mean, I came on when we were doing about 170, $180,000 a month. There were 12, 13 of us,
Oh,
and
wow.
left when we were doing $600,000 a month and 70 of us. So we grew really fast. It was a lot of fun. Um, that was where I've seen when I was doing financial consulting, I saw so many people's books and understood how they worked, but never through an operational lens, always through a
Mhm.
financial. It was fun to put my
Like
hat on
everything,
and
everything came full circle over there,
exactly, exactly.
dropped into the other, and then
Yes.
that's where you're at right now.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I stepped out of that in March and then run my own agency now and consult with, I don't like the coaching stuff's fun,
Hmm.
but it's, there's, there's a reason coaches either don't run an agency
Yeah.
or are growing their agency. Cause it's kind of
That's
like, have you seen School of Rock?
yes.
So when, Jack Black is pretending to be a teacher and he's sitting down
Yeah.
with all the teachers. He's like, those who can't do, teach. Those who can't teach, teach them.
Yeah.
He looks at the
That
young
that
teachers.
that line stuck with me as well.
It's so true. But I feel that there are great people out in the market who are doing great things around the coaching space. But at least to the way I relate to it, it is very like I don't want to be someone's monkey and dance. And programs, I think, they are hard at scale. And so working deeply with some larger agencies and then growing my own, I've found something. I get to scratch the itch of my passion while also
Yeah.
building something that makes a lot of money, which is fun.
That is amazing. So when you started out on like even joining that sales role
Yeah,
when you didn't know who he was, all of that,
yeah.
what was that goal? Like, did you have like a financial goal in mind? Did you have like a broader goal in mind initially?
Um, well, I knew in June when I was like, I'm gonna quit. This either has to turn around or I'm gonna quit is because my wife got a job and was making more money than me. And there was like this, again, just
Yeah.
an immature ego in me that was like, my wife can't make more money than me, which is just so dumb, right? Like so dumb. But it was what it was at the time. And I don't know if that completely answers your question, but that was kind of the first goal. And then what it kind of came into was something that I had a lot of fun doing and saw the growth in it.
Okay.
It wasn't like I had, and I wasn't also like we talked about me owning a part of the business, but it wasn't done. And so I wasn't a business owner. I was spending a lot of time around business owners, but I wasn't one. And there was a desire to want to do that, but I was really deeply invested in, okay, like I'm going to eventually be partner here. We've talked about that. And I was really hooked on the vision of what we were building because it was working so well as
Yeah.
I started building relationships with people. Because what I found, particularly in the internet marketing space, is we spend so much time. This is about as much human interaction in a deep and meaningful way
Yeah.
you and I will probably have for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
The majority of our time is spent, if we're on a call like this, it's hyper efficient,
Yeah.
zero relational. And what I found is I didn't really I needed to know like a couple of things about taxes, but when I could tell you just something that you were like, oh, I'm not doing that, and you just
Mhm.
assume that I know what I'm talking about
Yeah.
everything thereafter, it really just became about becoming people's friends. And that was so much fun. It was,
Yeah. I really love that perspective. I'm
yeah.
going to use that in my sales calls going forward.
But
Yeah.
do it.
It
It's and when you're doing a B2B service like you are with other agencies, it really like obviously you are their revenue driver in that you are their product, right? their service is built around you fulfilling on what the core fundamental thing that they're selling is, right? But so much of that, your LTV is likely created off of, sure, building a better product, but I think you do a good job from what I've heard about you and from the people you've worked with. It is also too about how deep of a relationship can you build with folks. And that probably extends your LTV too, because there is moments in time where it makes sense for an agency, depending on the desires the agency has, to go from white labeling to bringing that in-house.
Yeah.
As difficult as that likely is to talk about for
Mhm.
white label provider, it is a natural kind
Yeah,
of
it is.
thing.
We've had most of our agencies that like scaled beyond 200K, get things in-house, and then we support them doing that. It's like obviously they're growing. We're more than happy to help them grow in whichever way it is. Yeah,
Smart.
yeah,
Very ethical too. Good for you.
yeah, that's what we've done. Yeah, and come back to the number. So once you hit the salary more than your wife, if you
Yeah.
have it at that time, what,
Yeah.
what changed in your mind? Like, was it okay? Now I am here. What kept you motivated? Like, what pushed you further, or was it like, okay, now
Well,
I attained this goal, I'm
I
sorted.
think during like the most I made when I was doing sales at Clever was like 120-ish thousand, 130, somewhere around there.
Hmm.
And that I was definitely like, whoa. I mean, I grew up pretty poor, thought I wanted to be a pastor for a little bit. Pastors make no money. And so when I made that kind of money, I was like, I think I make more than my parents do.
Hmm.
And
That's always the first
yeah,
ladder
yeah.
that.
But it's also not a lot. Like it's a drop in the, like I was spending time talking to 21-year-olds who were selling info products. Like we did $5 million last month. I'm like,
Oh, whoa.
right. Post that, more income came out of necessity, and then more income once we started building. Once I came in and started co-running that agency and we started really making a lot of money, that totally changes the picture around what finances look like. But I would say, I don't know if there's a deeper thing you're trying to get at with asking me around money. I would say generally my relationship, it's not necessarily about us. As I've added on, I have 2 kids now, I have a wife, we have a mortgage payment. Sure, there's things we have to, like,
Yeah.
more responsibility adds more necessity of income. But once you surpass that, right? Once you make like $10,000, $15,000 a month, um, making more is great and it's awesome. Um, and but like I would say my general attitude to it is I'm not sure entirely what I want money to serve me to do, and I also have some like insecurities around, if I'm honest, I have some insecurities around like, hey, we did $600,000 last month. Can we do it again?
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing.
Yeah.
That's a
I get
weird,
that because I have a similar thought every single month. It's like, oh, have I gone $500 less than last month? Or
exactly.
am I going to go $500 more?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not, I definitely think there are people out there who are like, what I'll say to my relationship about money is I didn't grow up thinking that I was ever going to make this much. So I have a lot of like scarcity shit I have to work through most of the time.
Yes.
But there's the honest answer. There's the like not sexy, I'm on a podcast.
Oh, yes, that is very, very, very
Talk
honest.
about. Yeah.
So when you were in the day-to-day of this large-scale operation of an agency, what was your daily routine? Like once you get start and
I think a lot of those mechanisms are mechanisms that don't hit the core issue. And we think that the mechanism will solve what's really happening. So like if I wake up at 5 and put on my vision board, that's somehow going to help me get over my self-worth issues. And I think some of that is true. Like I think the process being whatever we're building or whatever we're doing and the things that get brought up in us through that. I
Mhm.
I I think that naturally will come about in finding some sort of resolve or character adjustment. And so those things may spurn those or spur those, I'd say, not spurn those, meaning those things may
Yeah.
be good initiators to that process. But I would say by and large, as someone who feels decently self-aware, I haven't been very served by, especially as I've had kids and you have kids. So especially as I've had kids, the Andrew Tate, who I'm not here to shit talk by any means, but this kind of like rah rah, I'm a
Yeah.
man. I wake up at 5 a.m. I only drink freaking Powerade and protein shakes.
Yeah.
Like, or that kind of entrepreneurship, which I also think is dying, which is nice. Like it hasn't served me in terms of what my life kind of needs, which is I
Mhm.
need to get a certain amount of sleep. Sometimes I don't. Like last night, I didn't go to bed until 12:30, rocking a baby. 12:30 back in the day when it was just me, and I'm 24. I need to wake up at 7 to start work. It's like
Yeah.
I could do that all day. 12:30 now, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you're up at 1:30, man. I'm crashing. Um,
Yeah. It is
but I,
24 hours now.
yeah, the auxiliary stuff to how work is done. Like life became so busy. There are certain things like taking care of my body
Hmm.
or taking care of my emotional health via therapy. Those things are definitely necessary, but they don't necessarily fit in the way that we want efficiency to happen. That and talking about the outside of, let's call it the 8:30 to 6 or
Yeah.
8 to 6, right? And there's work certainly happening outside of those hours, especially when you have a large team and you're running shit.
Always on
Within that,
Slack and all of that. Yeah.
yes, especially on the weekends when you're running an agency. Um, the inside of that stuff, how did I have things serve me? It is um, time blocking. Sure, that helps as a tool. Like there's a lot of tools out there, but the big thing I would say, as kind of at least the thing that jumps out to me immediately, is one of the hardest parts about running a big team, and particularly about running a virtual team, is that um, it is it is so easy to die in meetings. It's so hard to do
Yeah.
deep work, and particularly it's hard to do deep creative work. Like when you need to come up with if you're going to do script writing, sure, we can sit in a room like this, but what usually ends up happening is this like hyper efficient mentality of like we're going to get on, or maybe I write the script, I send it over to this person, and and then they send it over to that person. We have no
Yeah.
contact. It's purely assembly line. And so there's a yin and a yang of like there's this yin of there's this negative mechanism in that in order for me to have a 2-second conversation, I have to Slack someone, then we have to set up a meeting. And now in order for me to get through this really just small thing aspect of work, it's taking me about 30 minutes, like the negative side
Yeah.
effect. And then the other side of the yang, kind of the too far approach is, I have too many meetings. I think I need to talk about work so much, especially when I'm insecure about managerial layers or I don't trust people appropriately in my business to be able to
Yeah.
handle the responsibility I've given them. I have to micromanage, but I'm not going to call it micromanage. I'm just going to show up to those meetings that I have too many of. Like there's a kind of
Yeah.
pendulum swing. Um, so, what do you do? I think you learn those things through just lots of failure and
Mhm.
error and scaling. I mean, the process of failure through scaling kind of forces you to figure shit like that out.
Yeah.
And you adjust as you
Yeah.
navigate that accordingly. I don't think there are hard and fast rules.
Now that you said, obviously there's setbacks in your journey. Nothing is just a straight rocket up. What has been biggest setback that you've overcome, if you
So
would like to share about it?
first thing that comes to my mind as an agency, and I talk about this a lot, um, or I poke at it at least. I try and be humorous when I poke at things. Maybe I'm insecure. I don't know. But the worst 3 months of my life in running two things. One was the first day stepping in a COO. I'll never forget because my background in running an accounting firm, the churn I would experience was so minimal. It was
Hmm.
maybe
Yeah.
from our 0 to 100 clients. I don't think I lost a client. Like we kept all of them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The my first day stepping in a COO that evening, I went to a baseball game with my wife and some friends. And I think while we were at the baseball game, I got 3 to 4 Google Chat messages because we were using Google Chat with clients, not Slack, saying people wanted to leave. And it wasn't a nice, hey, it's been real, guys. We love you, but we need to pause. It was like, screw entire daughter's college savings. And you're like, what the heck? And so I'm panicking. So that
Yeah.
was one first, was adjusting and starting to really understand. Well, there's some micro things, but also the macro things about the micro things being how our product was serving as individual clients. Macro things being what does churn mean in an agency? Because it's also natural and it's going to happen. And my relationship with churn, especially at scale, is important.
Yeah.
And then I would say just as the other thing that jumps out to me of what are like some of those big failure moments was we got hacked. And this is the thing I probably talked a little bit too much about on Meta, but it's very important to me. Mainly, last year and prior to last year, Meta had terrible security.
Yeah.
There were
Really bad.
tons of. There was a really funny article that got published by the Wall Street Journal, probably July last year, sometime July, August, maybe sooner, where they found out security guards. They had an internal ticketing system, as you likely know,
Yeah.
that only Meta employees are allowed to use in order to flag things, mainly due to the fact that there's so many micro
Mhm.
economies within and departments that there needs to be internal ticketing systems. Also, just due to the nature of how many employees there are. And so what they found out was really the only people with security in the title in their name at Meta who were the security guards that just worked the HQ out in California were being bribed via people in various countries to get their logins to submit tickets on the internal ticketing system. What they discovered was their request would just go through. So if they sent enough, it just would happen and it would work. And that's true too on the advertising support side, but it was abundantly true of the internal side. The additional issue that was really bad and still is bad, there are still ways around this, is they had unlimited attempts to the two-factor authentication number that they sent to your phone. So if you had 2FA for your phone and you just threw a number generator in, someone could just, they would get in because there's unlimited attempts. And they just changed that last year. Yeah, Authenticator app, I'm not totally against, but like this is a YubiKey, it's a physical key. We want to get a little anal or a little like zombie apocalyptic conspiracy theorist here. The thing about do you know what a Trojan horse is?
Yes.
So if someone could Trojan horse your computer and still get around, if they tried hard enough, still get around your security measures. So the thing I like about this, and that has happened to agencies, like that's a real thing. They click on a link, a Trojan horse is installed on your computer alongside them getting access to the password that you put into their fake Facebook site, right? But a Trojan horse is also installed. They wait a month and then they just take over your computer one night, right? The nice thing about this is it's a key that has to be plugged into your computer. Now, what if they Trojan horse you and this is plugged in?
Yeah.
Well, that's the cool thing about this key is you have to physically touch this yellow part here in order for it to work.
Okay.
So the key is really.
So that lets you run your computer only when it's plugged in, or how does that work?
That connects to two things. You can connect it individually via an API key to your Meta account and your single sign on Google, to which then all of the apps that you're using for security purposes, you can always just use Google as the login, never create a password on the site. And if it's connected to your single sign on, you just have to have that plugged in and walk through the couple of steps. Very simple once you set it up. It's plugged in, it'll prompt you, you touch it, you enter in your code, you touch it again, and you're in. Very simple.
What's it
But
called?
I am big. YubiKey.
YubiKey.
Why UBI? I'm huge on that because it wasn't that we lost $200,000 in our marketing agency, and that is our money and collective of client money that was spent on spam ads. That wasn't the worst part, right? We got that money back after 3 months. We can cash flow. We can manage. Clients are upset about that. We can manage. The worst part was we couldn't use we couldn't do the thing we were getting paid for on Meta. And so we're losing revenue. We're churning clients because of it. So if you try and annualize the amount of money we lost on that,
Yeah. That's
it's over 7 figures. Yeah.
yeah.
Like it's bad. That was the worst experience because we also didn't do a good job cleaning up the business manager of other ad accounts. So we were at the size where we've gone through 5, 6, 700 people, and we've got all
Yeah.
these random ad accounts that we might still have access to that they have their cards on file. And now we're dealing with a logistical shitstorm of all of that, and it is.
I can't even imagine at that scale that happening is like I shit my
Dude,
pants.
dude, yeah. And then there's so many things that I learned about Meta through that where I'm like, this is not good. Like to serve billions of people,
Hmm.
it's very difficult.
It's crazy. That you said you had such a big team
Yeah.
managing all of these people. What is,
Yes.
I don't know if you directly were involved in the hiring process, were you?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was it that you would tell agency owner to look for someone if they're wanting to hire someone, irrespective of
So,
their skill set?
yep. So when I think about, and this might be a little elementary, kind of thought processes like this help me be able to communicate my needs better, and they also helped me get on the same page with the people I needed to make these decisions with. Less so the people we ended up hiring or how we spoke to those people, but internally and for myself. So when
Okay.
I think about what I need in my business, there are kind of 3 rungs. There's worker, so someone to do the work,
Hmm.
and 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 it is just doing the work. They get the job done, right? Then there's manager, which that's above worker, and their goal is to make sure the job is done
Hmm.
right. Right? Worker gets the job done, doesn't mean it's right, right?
Yeah.
Manager, they're hired, the role is created to make sure the job gets done right.
Hmm.
And typically sub 100K a month agencies, just as an aside,
Yeah.
what they don't realize is they just have workers and no one has if you don't know who the manager is of someone, you are the manager.
Yeah. That's a lot of things that I've seen on the back ends of multiple agencies again.
Yes. So if you have media buyers and no one you're like they don't have there's no head media buyer.
Yeah.
You're the head. Welcome. You are the head media buyer,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think like they assume I've hired media buyers. It's their responsibility to get the job done right, and there needs to be effective management there within, because we've all heard stories of they set the budget wrong, the link's broken, the funnel's to a different client.
Wrong images. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean a million, and those things you could put. I make those mistakes sometimes, right? Like there's no one is obsolete of making
Yes.
dumb, silly mistakes like that. So then the next rung is manager, and each rung there's a higher price tag, right? Depending on where you're hiring from, but even if the dollar, because that's typically how the
Yeah.
internet economy moves off of, even if the dollar travels farther, your rung, if I'm hiring out of the Philippines or India, like it's great my dollar travels farther, right? But it's still going to be more expensive as I go up the rung. And the last one I would say is vision,
Hmm.
which getting the job done better, right? Managers doesn't mean that they're going to get the job done better. They're going to get it done right. Workers, they're just going to get the job done, right?
Yeah.
But there are people that we then hire that get the job done better. And if there isn't someone who's a visionary in your department, you are the visionary, right? The managers don't, I've hired managers or people who've run departments, but they're not necessarily visionaries. And so there is a bit of sharing, I would say, between the manager and visionary role. Um, and you can find elements of people who have vision within the worker role, but I would say that's kind of the way in which I've thought about, okay, each rung of that ladder enables me to communicate what do I actually need out of the role that I'm hiring for? What are the expectations I should have for salary? Because we started setting those based off of what we would find. And then think through healthy expectations of how does this person now relate to my business, right? Because if I know I'm hiring a manager, my expectations of what I'm looking for change, and the way in which I communicate what I need out of them through the hiring process also
Yeah.
changes. For a worker, same thing, right? So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I really like the vision part of it. Can you put a job role to a visionary, or it's just their personality trait in whatever job role?
I think it's both and. So like I'll give you an example. If I so like a head of is when we grew our agency, we separated departments for media buyers by platform. So we had a Meta, head of Google, right? Both of those things were managerial roles, but there were differences in the visionary capacities of those managers, right? That is a managerial bleeding into vision one. Another example of purely vision is like, okay, when we needed to build out a creative department, we needed to hire the leader first. We're not just going to go and say, hey, we need a videographer, and then assume that that department's going to run squeaky clean, right?
Yeah.
Then me or my partner are going to have to run that together, right?
Correct.
Or one of us was going to have to manage it in some
Yeah.
effect, right? And so what we decided was, okay, well, we don't really, you could think of it as a managerial role, but when I'm hiring for the visionary, one, it's going to likely be over 6 figures a year, right? And when I'm hiring for that visionary, I also have better expectations of what I'm communicating that I'm looking for, right? Which is, I don't necessarily need you to just come in and make sure the job is done right, because no one knows what the job is. We need you to come in and build this thing and make it what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so that, it's not perfect, it's not rocket science,
Yeah.
but that's at least the way
I get the thought process now with what you're saying. Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect. So with the new agency owner, I'll just keep a couple more questions. We're almost done with time. When someone's starting out a new agency, what's one non-negotiable thing that you would tell them that they need to be doing every single day as they're starting out?
Right ads.
Right ads.
I mean, I could go back and forth on that, but this is not directly answering, but I think a big issue that we see with marketing agencies is scalability is scaling a product that isn't innovating. Typically what happens is through trial and error, you figure out a good strategy.
Yeah.
Strategy starts working, you bring on more clients, and then you have to put your business owner hat on and not your marketer hat on. You take your marketer hat off and you try and scale something. And what ends up happening most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, we're just hiring a lot of workers, no one who actually comes in and innovates the product. And we don't think about innovating the product until scalability starts not working. And maybe sometimes not even then, right?
Yeah.
Get to 100, 200, 300K months, and then we go, my CPL is trash. Oh, well, when's the last time you did a split test in a way that actually made sense? Not just like you let your media buyer change the headline. You ran it for one client and you assumed that that's statistically significant enough. And now this is the best headline for you and your agency. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense though. We've seen that where people peak at 200K, don't know what's happening, then eventually they get bored of it, sell it, whatever, not go beyond that ceiling.
And operationally too, that is a ceiling where it kind of, you're at the limits of the owners, meaning you really have to build a managerial layer and learn to trust those people. And if you don't,
it'll fall apart.
Exactly. And so most successful entrepreneurs who get to that stage, they wouldn't call themselves micromanagers. But when you've expended yourself to the point of building this thing and you feel like it becomes a child, right? Elon Musk talks about his businesses like that. Someone asked him, there was a point in time where and we're not playing the scale of what Elon Musk is saying. I'm not trying to, like, none of us are Elon Musk of our space. The internet space is far from it.
Yeah.
But I think the piece to that still remains the same. We invest so much of ourselves, our self-worth becomes tied to it, right? And then it's very difficult to allow people space to be able to pick up their baby and care for their baby.
Yeah, I had that right at the beginning. It took me like 2 years to hire my first employee. So to get that mindset shift, it takes a long time. And then obviously when you're scaled at that level, I can't even imagine what what you would be wanting to do that at that point in time.
Elon Musk size, I have no idea how you do that. I've never gotten close.
So out of all the acquisition channels that you've ran to secure clients for your agency, what you would say is the best, or do you think that you need to be everywhere? I'll put that into a better question. To get you to 100K a month.
Meta. You don't need to go anywhere else.
Okay. Just
Unless you're, I mean, we need to be niche. I think sometimes that's so for example, like you and I, we could talk all day about local.
Mhm.
When we sit down with someone who's a great ecom buyer or a great ecom agency owner, principles don't just broad brushstroke apply to both of us, right? Hey, this is the way you need to optimize your landing page. We're going to have our principles are not going to work
Yeah. So
unilaterally, both sides. Like they're broken. And so I think a part of an agency owner's journey too, when they figure out what kind of thing that they're trying to build, is also trying to figure out who to listen to because there's so many people talking, and we draw a little bit too quickly on, hey, what worked for me is going to work for you when the business model is massively different.
Mhm.
So the niche does need to come into play a little bit here, but most niches, local service businesses, local businesses, scaling those, which I think is what you're asking me about.
Yeah.
So those agencies, right? You're
Yeah.
on Meta. There's not anything that I can think of right now off the top of my head where it makes sense to go anywhere else. And if
Mhm.
Meta isn't working for you, oh, lead costs are rising, CPMs are rising. What the real issue is you suck at making creative. And I think one of the biggest bottlenecks for those agency owners trying to get to 100K is that you see so many agencies who have an okay B2C strategy that isn't innovating much. They just found one and built a business off of it, right? And then when they have to go to B2B, they have to learn a new strategy and they have to lose some money and
Yeah.
they have to learn again. And a lot of people get stuck there because they're not able to do that.
Yeah. They
B2B, sure,
reiterate once or twice and then just give up after that.
exactly. And the amount of refreshing that needs to happen in B2B versus B2C is a lot. The market's more sophisticated, right? Sure, you can get by. Sure, there are exceptions and there are outliers. But even so, still, too, you have to be a better marketer on B2B to an extent, at least quality-wise, right? Like high quality videos to a B2C local market, they're going to suck compared to a native
Yeah.
UGC ad, right? You flip that on its head, though, in B2B, right? It'll work the inverse, right?
Yeah, because they see you as an authority and all of that on there.
Exactly. And you don't see any agency that isn't a quasi-personal brand as well, right? Typically, the owner or owners, there's someone who is the identifiable patient for the brand.
Yeah.
And when that isn't there, you don't like that isn't there for agencies typically once they get surpassing 8 figures.
Yeah.
I don't, and even so, still, you're seeing it largely there, right? There's only a few brands we can think of where there isn't a person that is uniquely intertwined with them.
Yeah. So now that you brought that up, I will have a follow-up question to that. That have you seen it better that the owner is very involved in everything in terms of a selling perspective if they want to exit an agency into like when their face is everywhere, even on the ads, everyone knows that they're directly buying something from Avery and not buying something from Avery's company, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the Chambers Media recently is probably a bad idea, bad to say to it, but they were a large part of their agency was acquired, and I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head. The guy who ran, I think it's Matt. I don't know. His last name is Chambers, hence Chambers Media, but he was in every ad, and you started seeing that shift naturally happen.
Mhm.
But there were certain characters that were still around consistently, and there became a common brand identity that they did slowly, right? There's a larger guy that was kind of in every ad. And so as you started seeing the main guy, Chambers, pull away from it, you saw those characters come out more, but they did it very naturally in the market and they kept the brand identity. So can it happen? Yes, but it's not a like happen overnight. I sold my
It's a well
business.
thought out strategy. Yeah.
And typically too, when you sell a business, there is a 6 to 12 month at minimum process of you still working within it to
Yeah.
hand over rights to whoever the operator is at minimum, right? And typically there's seller buyouts of 5 to 10 years. But yeah, I mean it is a process that has to undergo when that event happens, less so. Unless it's unless it's a large agency, I think it's 80% of sales happen to either a competitor or roll up, meaning another
Yeah.
in the agency speak, it's either someone who's directly competing after me or a larger agency that just wanted
Yeah.
to buy up market share. And in those acquisitions, what they're buying is clients and maybe IP, maybe, but there isn't a ton of IP in the space,
Yeah, I don't think so.
right? So therefore, then, um,
It may just be an additional department to add to their company or
exactly.
just the book of business.
20% are being bought, yeah, and various other methods, and that's where that conversation becomes more important. Is it possible? Yes, but someone becomes the identifiable patient.
Okay. All right. That does answer my question. Uh, Last question for you.
Yeah.
What is it that you are currently doing after this entire journey that you've had and all the experience that you've gained? What is it that you currently do, and how can you help maybe an agency owner or whoever it is that you're helping right now?
Yeah. So now I work with a small group of agencies. I work with 5 to 6 at a time. I really just like working with like $75,000 a month and higher.
Mhm.
Typically, when you want a, a coach is really just an emotional cheerleader below that, and I'm happy to eat my words there. I'm I'm painting a broad brushstroke. There are definitely moments along the journey where the coaches are very valuable. So I'm not trying to shit on coaching. But for me, for the way that I relate to that role, it is it is me giving you permission to do the hard things that we both know are required, right?
Mhm.
After that is when there's enough resource in the system for us to really build a business. And that is much more I'm much more valuable to you there. Though I think
Yeah.
I'm valuable prior to that, it's just it's hard. There's the scalability and the amount you kind of have to have the same conversation over and over again for them to really hear you because what's really happening there is they have a feeling or a belief, less
Yeah.
so there's a process or a system or leverage that needs to be created, right?
Yeah.
So I do that now, and helping them grow their agencies. And then what I spend most of my time doing is building my own agency. So I have a niche that I work in, and you could figure it out pretty easy by my profile. And I generate leads and I scale that, and that's fun. Leaving there's moving to Nashville. We're moving to Nashville. This is more answer than you're asking for, but my family and I are moving to Nashville. I've kind of rethought the way in which the next agency that I scale, I have an agency and it's growing, but the next agency that I scale, I want to do the majority of that work in person. I want to bring the majority of the creative or the creative leads within that in person, just because that watching that play out at scale as I did is just it's tricky and
Mhm.
it's hard to do it virtually. So that's
Yeah.
what I do.
Awesome. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, yeah, Facebook. I have a group that I just started last week to have a
Oh,
space to have these conversations. So if you're looking for a community of agency owners, I'm trying to build one. Whether or not I'm doing a good job, you have to ask the other people in there. Uh, so yeah, just reach out on Facebook, join the group, come hang out. That's the best way.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Dude, thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate you.
I appreciate all the patience that you have, man. for
Yeah, you're
for
welcome.